Hey, good evening. Tonight is the night that we catch up, finally, Baruch Hashem. We're on the bottom of Tzadi Vav, Amud Aleph, and we are about 5 lines into the wide lines. We just had a flurry of questions, some of which had to do with Bailim, as it related to Nechsei Malug, some of which have to do with Shlichus. And the Gemara here kind of lays down the law. We're beginning on the line that starts with V'ika, and we're starting at the next words. Amar le Ravacha B'Reid Rav Avya le Rav Ashi. When it comes to a Baal, that's plukta de Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish. When it comes to a Shliach, that's plukta de Rabbi Yonasan v'Rabbi Yoshia. So we're going to now analyze each of these approaches to try to get some klalim in place so that we can understand some of the questions that we asked yesterday. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'hakol nihya b'dvaro. So the Gemara says, when it comes to a Baal, it's plukta de Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish. What is that discussion? Because remember, we're talking about a Baal that's a husband, where we're talking about his access to Nechsei Malug. Nechsei Malug is properties that a wife brings into a marriage. She owns the principal. He benefits from the peiros. So the Gemara says like this. To Itmar, Hamocher sadeu lechaber lepeiros. This is very similar to Nechsei Malug. I sell you my field only in as much as you're allowed to have access to the peiros. No different than Nechsei Malug. Machlokes Amoraim. Rav Yochanan Omer that your relationship to those peiros is the same as an owner and maybe Bekore. And when it comes to the world of Bikurim, not only can you be maybe, you can also be Kore. And the pasuk there it says over there that the property is yours. So that's a pretty big deal. And that's what Rav Yochanan holds, is that even if you only have access to peiros, so that also means that you can bring Bikurim. If we bring that back over to our case of the Baal, that also means that in regards to Nechsei Malug, that the husband's access to peiros is full-fledged, just ki'ilu he owns them. However, the dissenting opinion is Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish Omer, maybe ve'eno kore. Yes, you bring the bikurim out safek, but ve'eno kore, you can't read the psukim because you don't really own them. And let's see how each of these shitas play out. Rabbi Yochanan Omer maybe Bikore. Why is it that he says that you can fulfill the mitzvah of Bikurim and you can even say that this is my property? Because he holds that Kinyan Peros ke Kinyan Aguftami, that when you are Kone Peros, you are also Kone, halachically speaking, the Guf, and therefore you can be maybe Bikurim. Reish Lakish Omer maybe ve'enokor because Kinyan Peros lav ke Kinyan Aguftami. The machlokes we see over here by the case of Mocher Sodeh Lechaber Leperos, that if I sell you a piece of property only for the fruits, I own the base, you own only the fruits. Afal Pike and Rav Yochanan was Mekel. Reish Lakish was Machmir, and it's all based on whether or not we say Kinyan Haguf is Kinyan Aperos is Kinyan Haguf Dami. What about Shliach? When it comes to Shliach, that's Plugta, the Rav Yochanan, Rav Yoshia. The Tanya, we have a brisa. This is a brisa that we've seen a couple of times in Shas already. For the refresher, you can look in the Maseches Shas that this was in Maseches Nedarim as well as in Maseches Nazir. Ha'omer la'apotropos. Let's say I'm the husband and I say to my house manager, Kol nedarim shetehei ishti noderes mikan ad she'avo mimakom ploni hafer la. I'm going out of town. Any shvuas that my wife, any nedarim I should say, that my wife makes while I'm gone, please be made for them. So the husband went out of town. The wife made a bunch of nedarim. And the house manager, my friend, every neder she made, he nullified. You might have thought that the hafar of the house manager actually counts. No. Tamalomar ishah yekimanu ishah yeferenu. This is where the mapik hey comes in. Otherwise, the pasuk makes no sense. This is why, if you're a balkore, you have to be makbid on mapik heys. It is most likely le'ikuva lahalacha because the word is different. An isha without a mapik hey is a woman. Isha with a mapik hey is her husband, her ish. They're very different words. Anyways, that's pshat in the pasuk. Seemingly, Divrei Rabbi Yoshia, that only a husband can be mefer, and you can't appoint the capacity to be mefer to another person. However, the dissenting opinion in this case is Rabbi Yonasan. Rabbi Yonasan Omer Matzina b'chol makom sheshlucho shel adam kamosa. Who cares? I don't need it to be the Baal. Anyone can be mefer. If I, as the husband, appoint the house manager to be mefer the nadarim of my wife, no problem. Shlucho shel adam kamosa. So here too we see a machlokas, and we don't have time to do this, but we could take these two principles of Baal and the machlokas of Yochanan Reish Lakish and Shliach and the machlokas of Yoshua of Yonasan, and we can go back to the middle third of the page where we saw all the shilas yesterday and go through them and say This one's a machlokes Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. This one's a machlokes Rabbi Yonasan Rabbi Yoshia. We could do that if we had time, but we don't. So on your free time, which you don't have, go back and compare and contrast. And 6 lines from the bottom, Amar le Rav Elish le Rava. Ha'omer la'avdo. Let's say I say to my servant, say v'hashel im parasi. Go, borrow, let yourself be borrowed with my cow. Now, we learned a din over the last couple of days that let's say that I borrow your cow and you. So halacha is that I'm pater from shvur u'mesim. Furish state in the psukim that that's the case. So what about my eved? If my eved is lent out with my cow, is that the same thing as me being lent out with my cow? And just like if I had been lent out with my cow, you would be pater for shvuro mesa while you have the animal. The same is true with an eved. Mahu. Do we say that you'd be pater, or would you be chayev in regards to shvuro mesa? The Gemara says this is a shaila tiboy lamanda amar shlucho shel adam kamoso, and as well tiboy lamanda amar shlucho shel adam eno kamoso. This applies in all realms. It applies according to those who say shlucho shel adam kamoso, because we don't know if, even if you say shlucho shel adam kamoso, would it be an eved? We're going to discuss this in a moment. Let's just actually go into the Gemara's details of the question. 4 lines from the bottom in the middle of them. According to the Shita who says that there is shlucho shel adam kamoso, that I can appoint you to be my representative, well, that's all well and good, but hani mili de bar mitzvahu, one of the rare phraseologies of the phrase of bar mitzvah. Usually it's bar chayuva. This is I don't know. Have you ever seen this? Anybody? I don't recall ever seeing it in Shas. It's probably been there. No, could be. Anyways, says the Gemara, we say shlucho shel adam kamoso with another yid, but we don't say it by a goy about eved, the lav bar mitzvah. No, the eved's not a bar mitzvah. So even according to the shita of shlucho shel adam kamoso, maybe we have a limit on that din that it only applies to a yid and doesn't apply to an eved. Oh, Dilma, perhaps we could ask the shaila of me telling my eved to have himself lent out with my cow. So perhaps we'd say that you're right, there's no shlichus, but maybe there's another halachic mechanism in play, which is yad eved ki yad rabo damya, in which case if we say yad eved ki yad rabo damya, then even though we don't hold the shlichus shel adam kamoso, still we might be able to say that because I appointed my eved to have himself lent out, that perhaps the one to whom he's lent out would be pater in a case of shvuru mesa. So we don't know the answer to this question. Do we say that if a master tells his eved, let yourself be lent out with the para, is that considered to be a case of bailim imo, and therefore pater b'shvuru mesa? Says the Gemara with no fanfare, amar le mistabra yad eved ki yad rabo damya. It seems to be that even if we were to say ein shlucho shel adam kamoso, that shlichus doesn't work in a classical way, that we would still say yad eved ki yad rabo. If yad eved is ki yad rabo, then if you borrow my eved and my cow, you will be pater. Very good. We're on the bottom line now of Tzadi Vavim at Aleph. Boy Rami Bar Chama, Baal b'nichsei ishto. We've already discussed this somewhat. We're coming back to it. When it comes to a husband, as it relates to the property of the wife, this is a fascinating shaila. Is he a shoel have or socher have? So what does that even mean? Let's take a look at Rashi. Do we say shoel have? Kasal kadaitech lischai be'onse behemos nechse maluk shala shu ose behen malachto. Oh, so I'm married. My wife brought in a couple of cows, and I'm out in the field using those cows. Am I a shoel where I'm chayiv and onsin, or am I a socher where I'm pater and onsin? No, she let me use them, but what's my role? On the one hand, I get the payroll, so perhaps I'm a socher. At the same time, it's kind of understood that I can use them, so maybe I'm just a shoel. So when a husband is utilizing the nichse malug of his wife, is he a shoel or is he a socher? Great shaila. Nafkamina is le'inyan onis. So let's see. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava lefum churfa. The person who asked this question is so bright that therefore shabeshta, he made a mistake. Mon of shach. Ishoel have. If we say that the husband is a shoel as it relates to nichse malug, so she'ela b'bailim. Well, no problem. It's the cow, and it's the wife's cow, and you're there, and the cow is there. Should be pater from ones because of the unique din that the Chumash taught us over the last 2 days. That bailim imo, you're pater from shvur of a mesa. And isocher have, Schirus b'baylam. Who cares if you're a shoel or if you're a socher? At the end of the day, in both cases, you're going to be pater from onsen because of the din and chumash of baylam imo. Once we have the baylam, which is the isha, and the cow, which is the cow itself, that's when the pasuk is triggered, and therefore you should be pater no matter what. So that can't.
It is interesting. She said she emo probably with a lot though. Is that really true? Okay. Find that out. He goes off to work in the morning with the cow. She comes along every day.
It means that when they work in the field, they work together. It doesn't mean he goes off to work. It just means I'm saying it's agricultural. They're working.
Okay, maybe. I was looking to see if maybe she's like him, he's like her, and
what does the rest of Rashi mean?
Well, why is it Shayla Violet?
Right. What's the rest of Rashi? V'hinish eles lo. She allows him to borrow it. Chila mishanasa. She allows him to borrow it from when they're married.
Right.
That's all in the Havamina. But Lamaisa, she's present again. Whatever the parameters are. Remember that we saw yesterday that if she's there by the She'ela, she doesn't have to be in the field. We saw that yesterday.
So maybe that's what these last words mean.
Yeah.
Once that
but the first part of Rashi seems to be that she's mamish there.
Right.
Which seems unnecessary halachically because you should be putter anyways as long as that was a Bayan Rava yesterday within Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yoshim. Okay. So that's version 1 of the question, which we reject. That can't be the question. So we're on Tzadi Vava Medbeis, 4 lines down. What is the case where we're not sure if the husband is a shoel or a socher as it relates to nichsei malug? Says the Gemara, the agar mina para v'hadar nasba. She works at Home Depot and she owns the cow rental section. They weren't married yet. Single guy, single girl goes over to the counter. He says, "Hi, I'd like to rent a cow." So he rents a cow. He also says, "I'd like to see your shidduch resume. You seem like an erlich, beautiful bas Torah." Great. Huh?
Good in orange.
Yeah, looks good in orange. There you go. Where's Mark when you need him? There's a little bit of Mark. No. It says the Gemara, maybe this case is what we're talking about. So first he rents from her, and only later do they get married. So what then is the case? Shoel habe o socher habe. Same shiloh. Do we say that he's a shoel and therefore he's chayv in onsen, or do we and therefore he's pater in onsen? Yeah, there's chayv in onsen. Or do we say he's a socher and that he's pater from onsen? Shoel habe va'asya she'ela bebaylim. Do we say he's a shoel and the she'ela happened with the Baal Mifka Schirus Shelo B'Bailim, and it undoes the Schirus so that it's no longer Schirus anymore. Or perhaps is the original Schirus the original Schirus. This kind of reminds me of like when somebody eats at a Kiddush and Shul and they make the mizonos and they eat enough mizonos and then they wash. So the halacha is, I heard Rabbi Friedman gave a shiur like this, that if a person were to eat a kazayas of whatever, mizonos, and then you eat a kazayas of grapes, you have to, even if you bench, you still have to make a bracha on what you ate beforehand, which is a fascinating din. The tour of benching doesn't cover foods that were not shaykh to the netilas yadayim, to the lechem. Huge chiddush. I'd never heard that. Chiddush to me because I didn't know. It wasn't not a chiddush in halacha. Oh, so the Gemara says, I don't know. Asks the Gemara, still, umashna. The ishoel have the asi shela b'baylam nafka schir shela b'baylam. Isocher nami have tesi schir b'baylam tebuk schir shela b'baylam. One way or the other, we're going to have the same exact din. If we say that it's a new she'ela and there's no schirus, so then it's she'ela b'baylam. If we say the schirus is the original schirus, it's still schir b'baylam. Nothing changes. So therefore, says the Gemara, that can't be the shaila. And now for version number 3 and the final version of what this question is, a quarter of the way down, she is the one who rented. She rented a cow when she was not yet married. She was single. She was in the parsha. And then v'hadar naspa. So then she rented a cow and then she got married. However, and this is very complicated and we're not going to dig into this because we have to get to the bottom of Tzadi Zayin and Beis. But the Gemara says, "Ve'aliva de Rabbanon." All of this is within the sheet of the Rabbanon who hold the Amrei Shoel Mishalem L'Socher Lo Tibaylach. When we say that in such a case the Shoel has to pay back the Socher, that's not what we're talking about. The Vadai She'ela B'Baylam. If we were dealing with a case where she rented it and then they got married and he borrowed it and something happened, according to the Rabbanon, you have to pay, the husband would have to pay back the socher, he'd have to pay back his wife. So that's not our shaila. However, according to the shita that it needs to be brought to the next to the previous owner. So then what do we say? Shoel habe o socher habe. So then the Gemara finally responds. Amar Rava, neither of them. Says the Gemara, what's the husband's relationship to his wife as it relates to nechsei melug? Amar Rava, Baal lo shoel have v'lo socher have. The husband is not a borrower, nor is he a renter. Ella lokeach have. The Gemara didn't even foreshadow all the possibilities. It just asked us the two that we've been discussing. But it was, I'm not saying it was a cheap shot. It's a reasonable way to frame the question because that's what we've been discussing. But a lokeach has a totally different din. Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina, a third of the way down. Dam Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina, be'usha hiskinu she'isha shemachra b'nechsei malug b'chai bailu meisa. This we learned a couple of times already. Let's review. We saw it in Ksubis twice, in Bava Kama once, and in this Masechta once, and we'll see it again a couple times in Bava Basra. So the Gemara says that if a woman were to be mocheres or nechsei malug during the lifetime of her husband, and then she died, so that goes to the husband. And in fact, habal motzi miyad halakuchos. This is not true midoraisa, but he's kinu beusha, one of the many takanos of usha, that this is the case. This is how we know that he's like a lokeach. Look at the language. Habal motzi miyad halakuchos. It's as if he was the original, owner. So says the Gemara, and therefore we conclude, and we're at the halfway mark on Sadi Bava Mebeis, we therefore conclude that a husband's relationship to the principal properties of the nechsei melug of a wife is that he is a lokeach. Very good. By Rami Bar Chama, Baal b'nechsei ishto mima'al. Let's say that a woman inherited a lot of money or a lot of property, and some of it was hektish and we didn't know, or at least she didn't know. So, and then it's used. Who gets the isser of me'ilah? Omar Rava. Rava's like, wait 1 second. Man limo, who is it that you're exactly trying to accuse of me'ilah? Limo Baal, if you want to say it's the husband, no. Because when the husband takes the peiros of the nechsei melug, the hetera nichale delikni, he would only want to take that which is mutter for him to take. Halachically speaking, you need to know what's going on. If you're taking nechsei melug, we can't have it be assumed to be hektish. And isura lo nichale delikni. Pashat, he doesn't want to have any isurim. He doesn't want to take nechsei melug that are aser. So it can't be that the Baal is going to be chayiv in me'ilah. And timo ihi, if you want to say that she is going to be chayeves for having the hektish, the teranami lo nichala delikni. When she makes her inheritance, she gets $1 million from uncle whoever. She doesn't halachically own that hektish because she wouldn't want it. It's not part of the kinyan. You want to say nimalu bezdin, that bezdin which enabled this Yerusha to transport her, would they be chayiv? No way. Ki avdu rabbanon takanta. The rabbis as well, the bezdin that enabled this Yerusha with hektish to fall to this Isha, there's no way, nobody's chayiv. And the Gemara says, you're right, at the moment when the money is sitting there in the bank account or wherever they used to keep it, you're right, nobody's chayiv. He, the husband, when he spends the peiros, that is when he will trigger the Yitzer. No different than a regular case of when you take hektish and spend it on chulin. This requires rishonim. What is the difference between the havamina and what is the difference between the seifa? And so it's not such a pasha d'zach, and that is what Rashi hints to over here, 4 lines from the bottom. Ela amar Rava be'odan tzirun munachen lo kina'am bel. As long as everything's all packaged up and let's just call it a stack of bills, they're all sitting perfectly, no problem. What we're talking about is that when the money, the hektish that she inherited is still in its original form, it's just sitting in the house, sitting in the bank, nobody violates anything. Having it isn't the problem. It's the act of being motzi, even though there was already one transaction. It went from the original bailim to this woman. So that's not enough for the Isser Me'ilah. Elamai, it must be that it's only true when you're motzi mos hektish l'chul. Next question, 3/4 of the way down on Sadi Bava Midbeis. Amar Leah Hume Rabbanon, Rab Chilkia Berei, the Rab Avia Shemei. There was a rabbi, and it was Rab Chilkia. Michlal, I think I skipped a little bit. Ibayalahu, sorry. 12 lines from the bottom. Ibayalahu, there was a shaila. Kichesh basar machmas malachama. Let's say there's a depletion of the animal when you're working the animal. What would be the halacha, right? So I borrow your animal and I work it very hard, loses 15 pounds or gets damaged. So says the Gemara, your question has a funky implication that if I'm responsible for the animal losing a little bit of weight because it worked, so then when the animal dies, I should be chayiv because I really depleted the animal down to zero. But that's not true. We know that Mesamach Mas Malacha is the heter of the Shah. The Shah is chayiv in everything, but he's not going to be chayiv in this. Says the Gemara, after all, you can't possibly say that Mesamach Mas Malacha is chayiv by a Shah. Nema, the borrower could argue, Lav le'ukma bekilsa she'ilta. I didn't borrow your cow to have it go sit in a prison cell. I borrowed it to use it. Pasha, there's going to be a depreciation, and there's no way you're allowed to hold me accountable. Ella amarava lomi baya. I don't even need you to tell me the case of kichesh basar machmas malacha de pater. I don't need you to tell me the case that when an animal loses a couple of pounds, gets a couple of scratches, that you're pater. Ella afilu mesa machmas malacha nami pater da amarle lav leukma bekilsa sheilta. The Gemara says this is a very important piece of Gemara because it is the Mari Makom that teaches us why Mesa Machmas Malacha is pater by a shoal. Let's just broaden this for a second. A shoal is basically chayev in everything, basically. The exception to the rule is when an animal dies of natural causes or dies because of regular work. So let's say I have a bull and I borrow it from you. I have the bull pulling the plow. It's doing exactly what it should be doing. I didn't overwork it. I fed it correctly. The animal drops dead right when we finish the last furrow of my field. Halacha is I'm pater. Why? Because it's assumed when I borrow that there's a depreciation. It's assumed. And the svara that the Gemara says in Aramaic is lav leukma bekil sashilta. I didn't borrow your animal so that it would sit there and do nothing. This isn't like the red heifer that we can't touch, can't work. Nothing. This animal is allowed to be worked. So therefore, the din is a mesa machmas malachas pater. And the story about this. Who gava the sha'il narga mechavre and ispar. So let's say you come over to my house and say, Phil, can I borrow an axe? That's a narga. And I say, sure. And you have it in your property. David has my axe and it breaks. I'm a little upset. It was my favorite axe. And we go to Bezdin. Asa lekame de Rabba. Amar le zil isi sade. Rabba says to me, says to, who borrowed what? I even forgot. David's a borrower. And the Rabba says to David, that'd be amazing to talk to Rabba. Rabba says to David, Zil isi sade de lav shanis be ve'iftar. Says to David, bring me a raya that you didn't mistreat the animal. You didn't deviate from the terms and conditions of borrowing. Ve'iftar. What?
I borrowed it.
Yeah.
Oh. Right? You're trying to chop up concrete.
I don't even remember what I said. It's amazing. Thank you for paying attention.
If I'm chopping up concrete, I'm tired.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. If you're chopping up a cow, it's mutter, by the way. That's totally normal. So says the Gemara that zil isi sade de lo shanis beve'iftar be'ileka sade mai. What happens if there are no witnesses to bolster David's claim of his typical use of the axe? Toshma, let's see. This time we have another Mari Makom, and let us analyze this. As we already saw in another Masechta too. Dahu gavra de shal narga mechavre ve'ispar. Same case. Also, by the way, it looks like it's a brisa from the Tashma. It's not. It's another statement in the Amorim. Tashma regularly, typically does, not all the time, I would say 90% of the time, speaks to Amorim. That's not Tanaim. That's not the case here. Because it says, Asalakame de Rab. And Amarle, Zil Shlim Le Nargam Aliyah. You need to go pay. If you can't bring a raya, that was our question. If David can't bring Adam to his cause that he's innocent, so then he has to pay the cost of the axe. That's what he said. Zil Shlim Le Nargam Aliyah. Go to Home Depot. Go buy me an axe, same size, same brand, same everything. Says the Gemara, Amarle Rav Kahana, the Rav Asi le Rab. They said to Rab, Dina Hachi, top of Tzadi Zayinim. Is that really the din? No way. The Hilchasa ke Rav Kahana. The halacha is like Rav Kahana, which is a little bit different. But Rav Asi, the Mahader le Tabre. David first gives me back the broken pieces, the wood handle, and the metal piece. He gives them back to me. And let's say it was I don't know, a $30 axe at purchase. He gives it back to me, and the shivrei kelim of the axe are worth $10. So he has to give me the broken pieces that are $10 and pay me the balance of $20 umanli le de mana. And then you'll pay back the irregular amount. So that's the din. Is that really if I'm a shoel and the item that I have breaks, so I'm pater as long as it is normal usage. That's the principle of Mesa Machmas Malacha. There was a man who borrowed a pitcher or a pail of some kind from his friend. Isbar, the pitcher broke. Papa. Very similar. Bring me a raya that you did nothing wrong, and then we're good to go. Another story. This one's getting a little weird. Okay, you borrowed a cat. Why? Because you have mice, right? I went to go do a circumcision in the deep belly of Texas. When I got there, there were cats everywhere. And I said to the owner, "What's the deal?" He's like, they help with the rodent issues, and they just had them roaming the whole place. It was crazy. All right, so then the Gemara tells a crazy maisa. Chibur ale achbere, all of the mice banded together, vikatluhu. You can imagine such a scene. The cat was there to kill. It's Mamish, Tom, and Jerry. Daf Bava Metzia, Daf Tzadi, Zayin.
Probably a bunch of Jews.
A bunch of Jews were the writers, We control the media, in case you haven't heard. So the Gemara says, what about this weird case? What would we say then? Because remember, I borrowed your cat, and now your cat's dead. But it's dead from a weird thing. It's not regular work. Says the Gemara, Yossi Ravashi becoming boile, ki hai gavna mai. What would we say when I didn't do anything wrong? The cat didn't do anything wrong. Who ever heard of the fact that mice band together and kill? So now let's broaden the question. What happens if we're the borrower, but what happens is out of the ordinary, but still out of your control? Because that's what happened here. Ki mesa machmas malacha dami? Is it like regular mesa machmas malacha, and I, the show, would be pater? Olo, or would I be chayev because it's not typical? Says the Gemara, Omar le Rav Mordechai le Ravashi hachi Amar Avimi mehagronya mishmei Rava Gavra de nashekat luhu lo dina v'lo daina. If a man is killed by a woman, there is no judgment in those cases. This is code word for saying that it is not normal and you are chayev. So say the Rishonim in these kinds of cases. Lo din v'lo daina. That is what the Gemara says. That's what Rashi says. Denoshe katluhu lo hoya lo lipo biadan. I don't know what that means. I mean, I know what it means, but what if there were multiple people with guns? I don't know. And just there's a certain assertion and assumption of this Gemara that's not so clear to me. There is an Ika de Amre though. We're about a quarter of the way down on Sadi Zayin Amad Aleph. It wasn't that the mice killed the cat by binding together as a group, but really achel achbare tuva v'chavil umis. Oh, the cat was superb. He did such a good job. He ate 25 mice, and then his stomach exploded. Whole different ballgame. So there, that's also abnormal. Yasiv Ravashi v'kama ayin ba ki hai gav namai. Amar le Rav Mordechai le Ravashi hachi Amar Rabbi mehagronya gavre de nashe katlu lo dina v'lo daino. That if there is a man who is killed by women, then they're considered to be accountable. Now, Rashi over here turns this because our case is different. What Rashi says in this case is the nashekat luhu. Rashi says, Ba'al be'ilos harbe v'mes. If there's a case scenario where a man cohabits with so many women to the point that he dies, so that's irresponsible. Right? There's a limit. There's a limit. So that's what the Gemara is saying over here. Same idea is that you will be held accountable in these cases as well. You need to stop the cat from eating all of these things, just like a man needs to be responsible not to put himself into sakana. And that's how the Gemara answers these questions. Amar Rava, let's say you want to create a scenario where you can borrow something and always be pater. Well, let's pull back our Gemara from 2 days ago. What does the pasuk say? That if the Bailim are with you, if the Bailim are there b'shas she'ela, when you are shoel, you're pater, because the pasuk says Bailavimo, you're not going to be mishalim. So the Gemara says, here's the chap. When you borrow something, neimale ashkiyan maya, go give me a cup of water. Why? Because then I'm renting you and your animal at the same time. that's Bailav Imo, and then you're pater. It's a chop, a little twist of the knife, So the Gemara says there, the Havi She'ela B'Bailav. And then the Gemara says, that's cute. That's very cute. But v'ipikeachu, if the borrower is holding cup, here's what he's going to do. Nemalei, yeah, you know what? How about sha'il beresha? Let's finish the borrowing phase first, and v'hadar ashke. Again, we'll do the water later. And now he's separating the she'el of the animal from the she'el of the bailim, and therefore the patur in the chumash is no longer applicable. Like literally like loopholes and avoiding loopholes, which is why we need terms and conditions. Says the Gemara, almost halfway down on Sadi Zayin and Aleph, heading to the Mishnah at the bottom of the page, and we'll learn that as well. Amar Rava, Mikri Dardiki, if you have a teacher, Shasla is a person who plants, Shasul al Palgei Mayim from the Pasuk in Tehillim, Tavcha is a butcher, the Umna is someone who does bloodletting, and Sapar Mata, the person who gives haircuts. All of these people, the Gemara assumes, Kuluhun Be'idan Avid Tahu Kishe'ela Bebailim Damu. When they do work, it's ki'ilu that there is a she'ela b'bailim. The Meforshim explained that's because they function off of taxes. So Rashi says over here, and in these cases, there would be a tour if something happened while you were using them. Amrulei Rabban and the Rava, sha'il lan mar. Things are about to get messy. The Talmidim said to Rava, I want to borrow things from you. Why did they say that? Because they were borrowing him and borrowing something because he was their Rebbe. So seemingly, it's a twofer. That twofer, the conditions of Bailim, of Bailav Imo, and that they're pater is if you're borrowing something and borrowing the person. So that's what the Gemara says. Let me borrow something from him because I'm already borrowing him. So the Gemara says, Ikpid. Rava was very upset about this. Amar lahu, le'afkui mamunoi kabaisu. What kind of Talmidim are you trying to wriggle out of paying me back if something happens? If there's an onus, you're going to be pater. What are you doing? And anyways, Rava says, Adarabba, atun she'il tun li. You guys are the ones who I'm borrowing. The ilu ana, when it comes to me, the Rebbe, mata ishtemute lechu mi masechta lemasechta. I'm allowed to switch masechtas as the Rebbe. I don't need your permission. What I teach, atun, but you can't leave me. You lo matzisu li ishtemute. So you're more committed to me. It's like I'm borrowing from you. Really, I should be pater if I borrow from you. Exact opposite. So how do we view the Rebbe? How do we view the Talmud? So says the Gemara Velohi. That's really not the right way to look at it. The answer is somewhere in the middle, which is often the case. As my wife astutely said tonight at dinner, if ever you see someone who says that the world is so black and white, they're the problem. That something's wrong. The world is a complicated place. And here's what it means to live in the middle, 2/3 of the way down to Lohi. Ihu sha'il lehu b'yom dekala. On the Yarchei Kala, 30 days before the Chagim, when the Rav is obligated to teach on that day, then he is the one from whom they should be doing the borrowing if they want to be pater. But inhu, they, the Talmidim, she'ilu le b'sha'ar yomi. It's reversed when it comes to Yira. Next, Meremar Bar Chanina, Ogar Kudnaisa Bechuzai. He had rented out a mule, an animal of some kind. Nafak lidluye te'una v'adayu. And he went to go be involved in putting packages on the animal. Pashu ba'umis, the person who was borrowing, who rented from him, they made an error, and the animal died. Asa l'kamei de Rava chayvinu, and they went over to Rava and Bezdin, and they said, Rava, what's the din in such a case? So he said, chayvinu, you're chayv. Amr le Rabban on the Rava pshia b'bailam. What do you? It's pshia b'bailam. Why would you say that? The bailam are there. If the bailam are there, you should be pater. Says the Gemara Ichsiv. Rava was embarrassed. Even the greats make errors in psak seemingly, but really not really, because the Gemara says, except that he didn't. L'sof, it turned. I mean, his psak was wrong in the initial presentation, but it was revealed later. L'sof igloi milsa de la mesar to unahu denafak. He didn't go out to physically help. He just went out to go see what was going on, to oversee, but he wasn't actually helping. Says the Gemara, I don't understand why Rava was so embarrassed. We learned about this machlokas a blot ago. We were talking in general about an ones, that if you have bailim who are present at the time of the she'ela, so then the borrower is going to be pater by ones. In regards to pshia b'bailim, we saw that there was a machlokas. So according to the one who says, pshia b'bailim pater Mishumacha ichsif, because he paskin chayiv when it should have been pater. That I understand. But according to Rava, why would Rava have been embarrassed if we hold the pshia b'bailim is in fact chayiv? Then he gave the perfectly correct psak. It was pshia b'bailim. So it says the Gemara, last of the short lines, last word on the line, we got the case wrong. Lo mifsha pashuba. The case that Rava was paskening was not a case of pshia, but rather ele ignuve ignov umesa kedarka began behavi. We were dealing with a case where something was stolen and it was mesa kedarka. In such a case, you would not be chayiv. You would, in fact, be potter. But also the kamed Rava b'chayvin. When this was the embarrassing part, Amrle Rabban on the Rava. Wait 1 second. Geneva b'bailim he. They changed the case. It's not a case of pshia because perhaps Rava was of the opinion that Geneva b'bailim, that pshia b'bailim, was chayiv. So Ella, it must be that it's a case of Geneva b'bailim, and he should have been potter, and that's why it was ichsiv. So, at the end of the day, Rava ended up being right. I'm sure HaKadosh Baruch Hu was, arranging behind the scenes for him, and he was potter because at the end of the day, when this person went out there to look at the animal, he wasn't helping; he was just watching. That brings us to a new Mishnah. We're going to learn the Mishnah, which will bring us to the open of the Gemara. Maybe we'll even get to we'll see how long this takes, but maybe we'll get to the last line, and then we're going to stop for the day, but at least we'll be on time one way or the other. New Mishnah. Tzadi Zayin Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. Hashoel Sapara. A person borrows a cow. She'ela Chatzi Yom, Uschara Chatzi Hayom. He is borrowing it for half a day, and he is renting it for half a day. Let's create a case scenario. I say to you, let me rent your animal from 9 to 12. At 12 o'clock, I say, I'd really like to return it. Do you mind if I keep it for an extra 2 hours? And you say, sure, no problem. You can do it for free. So that's part of the day schara and part of the day she'ela. Or shala hayom uschar lamachar. One day I rent, one day I borrow, another day I rent. Sachar achas v'shal achas. If there's 2 animals, I rent one and I borrow one. And then in all of these cases, umesa. How do we look at this case scenario? Because there's partial shoel where you should be pater from mesa machmas malacha, and then there is the case of socher. So says the Gemara, we have to look at all of the iterations. Hamashil, if the lender says Hamashil omer she'ula mesa, the one that you borrowed died. B'yom shahisa she'ula mesa, on the day that you borrowed it, it died, not on the day that you rented. Turning to the top of Tari Zayin Amud Beis. B'shah shahisa she'ula mesa, at the time that you borrowed it, it died. So that's what the lender said. And in return, v'hala amar eini yodea, and if the shoel, the borrower, says, I don't know, so then the Gemara says, chayiv. Why is this true? Take a look at Rashi, a beautiful shas sugya. We have one claimant who's confident about their claim, and the other claimant being unconfident about their claim. Rashi says, 3rd line, Dibur hamaschil chayiv b'shalim. Why is he obligated to pay the shoel? Because divrei debari v'shema bari adi. We have 2 different claims. The claim of the mash'il was a bari. The claim of the shoel said eini yodeh. So the halacha is that you're going to be you're going to be chayiv. Bari v'shema bari adi. Next case, Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis, going toward the Mishnah. Hasocher omer schura mesa. If a renter, that's not the shoel, if a renter says that the one that rented died, b'yom shahisa schura mesa, or on the day where I rented an animal as opposed to borrowing an animal that died, b'shah shahisa shvura mesa, or at the time that it was a schura, at the time that it was rented, it died, and then v'hala omer eini yodeh, then pater, because it's bari v'shema bari adif in the other direction. Ze omer she'ula v'ze omer schura, both confidently, that's bari v'bari, yishava hasocher she'schura mesa, then the socher has to make a shvua. Ze omer eini yodeh. If you have a person who says, I don't know, v'ze omer eini yodeh, that's shema v'shema, that brings us right back to the first Mishnah in the Masechta of Shnai Mochsim Betalis, Ze omer kula shali v'ze omer kula shali, and halacha is yachloku. So let's stop right here. Namir Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up at the open of the Gemara in the middle of Tzadi Zayin Amud Beis, wishing you all a beautiful night.